Kalispera και καλώς ορίσατε. My name is Spiridoula Demetriou, and on behalf of the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne and Victoria, I welcome you all here tonight. I can see lots of friends in the audience. I can see lots of new faces, which gladdens me. And we have an eminent Byzantine scholar in Professor Roger Scott with us tonight. So welcome, Roger. Thank you. The Greek Centre respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we gather tonight and pays respect to their elders past and present. We are about to listen to Olympia Nelson, who is one of our community's young and brilliant scholars. In 2015, the Community of Languages Australia proposed March as Speak Greek month to encourage more people to use Greek. So to honour this, I will now say that in Greek. Η Olympia Nelson είναι ένα λαμπρό ακαδημαϊκό αστέρι της παροικίας μας. This evening's seminar is sponsored by the Greek Australian Society and is titled Cretan Churches and Their Emotional Echoes, 14th Century Frescoes of Kantanos-Selino. The Greek Centre thanks GAS many times over for their support. Olympia is a PhD candidate in the Department of Modern Greek and Byzantine Studies at the University of Sydney and is an early career researcher representative for the Australasian Association of Byzantine Studies. Through the examination of visual art and literature, her research examines emotion in Eastern medieval contexts, including those of gender, monasticism, and dietary practices. By tracing these expressions, her work offers new perspectives on how Byzantines performed and regulated emotion in sacred and everyday life. Olympia's research demonstrates that frescoes in Crete are an important feature of Byzantine and post-Byzantine art. Tonight's lecture will chiefly elaborate on three topics, these being: 1, the presentation of 5 churches that comprised part of Olympia's fieldwork in the Kantanos-Selino region. Secondly, an examination of iconographies and stylistic developments. And thirdly, Olympia will also talk to us about challenges and rewards of conducting fieldwork on Crete. I now hand you over to our speaker. Thank you, Olympia.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Spiz, for the lovely introduction. It is an absolute pleasure to be here tonight. Well, we've just been in Sparta with Miltiade Pekopoulos, who gave us an amazing lecture last week. He inaugurated this year's seminar series with a fascinating exploration of Spartan legal culture. But this week, we're making a significant leap both in time and place as we shift our focus to Crete in the 14th century. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation as traditional custodians of this land and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Their deep connection to country, where land, culture and belief are inseparable, resonates with Crete, where landscapes shape history and identity. The churches I will discuss tonight are not just monuments, but integral to their surroundings, with enduring bonds between people and place. I'd also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Nick Dallas and everyone else in the Kinotita for inviting me to speak in this wonderful series. I had the pleasure of participating in a conference last year with Nick where someone described his seminar series as an open university, so a space where ideas are shared freely and intellectual growth thrives. It's an honour to be a part of this ongoing project, and I really appreciate your support throughout my PhD, so thank you so much. So, my PhD is about emotion in Byzantium. It contemplates the felt realities in a devout society. It seems constantly embattled from outside and sometimes from within. What did it feel like being a nun in the monasteries? What did it feel like to fast for long periods or to eat meagre portions in company, but in silence? What did it feel like to remind yourself of the benefits of suffering and to have the template of saints and Christ always as your guide? What did it feel like to witness your whole world of piety crumble year after year? And for me, these investigations also have a personal resonance, because what we look at when doing such research is a world largely left in ruins, where the remnants of a brilliant culture are dispersed and broken, and you inevitably encounter them with melancholy and even resentment. This part of my journey is one that I want to share today. If I had decided to study Renaissance art, I'd be able to show you perfectly curated examples of complete panels and frescoes or oil paintings with a grand apparatus of connoisseurship behind them. But this journey tonight will lack that support of Western art history. It's only Greeks and people especially attuned to things Greek that venture into this world, which, as you'll see, is pummeled and bruised and shattered, but still represents everything emotionally poignant about our larger Hellenic patrimony. So this lecture is in 3 parts, as Biz said. First, I will present 5 churches that I visited last year as part of my fieldwork on Crete, located in the Kantanos-Selino region. In these churches, I will discuss various iconographic types that were popular on the island, including the cult of Anna and the Virgin, representations of Christ, and broader iconographic trends in Crete. I'll discuss the challenges of conducting fieldwork in these remote locations, from issues of access and documentation to the broader difficulties of studying understudied sites. Finally, I will conclude with reflections on how these works fit, or perhaps fail to fit, into mainstream art history curricula and the broader art historical canon. And of course, we'll have some time for questions and discussion at the end. Hidden among olive groves and tucked away in the ravines of Crete are hundreds of churches, treasures of Byzantine heritage. These chapels, sometimes unassuming in their exteriors, are a testament to faith, art, and cultural resilience. As you navigate the rocky paths to reach them, sometimes with very few signs, you're transported to a world where the sacred merges with the natural. The hallowed sacred site stands still, frozen in time, while nature flourishes and transforms itself around it. Being in these somewhat abandoned churches is a full sensory experience. They are dimly lit, sometimes pitch black, with slivers of light filtering in only through the tiny windows, or through doors, or through faint candlelight. These spaces are often dead quiet, but for the hum of cicadas. For some reason, you instinctively whisper, as if the saints on the walls would tell you off for making a sound. These churches are not tourist sites, with artificial lighting, guided tours, or audio explanations. There are no plaques to tell their history, no designated paths to lead visitors through. The experience is immediate and unfiltered. These churches are not just places of worship, but gateways to a Byzantine past that remains just as alive as the land that shelters it. And tonight I will highlight 5 of these treasures. In July 2024, I had the privilege of visiting the Kantanos-Selino region as part of my fieldwork for my PhD. My fiancé, Chris, and I were fortunate enough to be chauffeured around by the talented photographer Manolis Papadomanolakis, whose expertise and local knowledge were invaluable. Without his guidance, conducting fieldwork in such a remote region would have been incredibly challenging. There's always a bit of uncertainty working in these areas, so whether churches will be open, how welcoming the villagers might be, and navigating the terrain, and I'll come back to this at the end of my lecture. Fortunately, we were welcomed warmly, and most of the churches we visited were open. So the region of Kantanos-Selino, which is located to the southwest part of Crete, is bordered by Kissamos to the northwest and Sfakia to the east. It's a region that feels both timeless and remote. It's about 40 kilometres southwest of Chania, the urban city centre. A 40-minute drive that, for us Melburnians, that's like driving from the Greek centre to Craigieburn. It's not actually very far at all, but these villages are regarded as distant and remote, and for Greeks, it would be considered a significant road trip. Kantanos has a rich history shaped by its resilient communities. In World War II, Kantanos fiercely resisted the Nazi invasion, leading to its destruction in 1941 as a brutal reprisal, marked by a German declaration forbidding its rebuilding. After executing civilians and burning Kantanos to the ground in retaliation for local resistance, the Germans placed signs stating "Hier stand Kantanos," or in Greek, "Edoi pirchei Kantanos," so Kantanos once stood here or once existed here, to declare its eradication. Despite this, Kantanos was later rebuilt and remains a symbol of Cretan defiance, and importantly for our discussion tonight, the churches still survive. So, our first church is Archangel Michael in Kastellorizian. This church is still in active use. It serves the local community. So when we went, they were burning candles, and as you can see, it functions to this day as the village cemetery site. Architecturally, it follows the simple, eyeless design typical of late Byzantine Cretan churches. Its fresco program dates to 1315 to 16 and is attributed to Ioannis Pagomenos, so he's a painter active on Crete during the 14th century. He contributed to the decoration of numerous churches across the island, commissioned by local peasant communities who acted as collective patrons. He's sometimes seen as a precursor to the Cretan school, which later blended Byzantine and Western influences for a wider audience. So what we're looking at here is the eastern blind arch of the north wall, so this is our image on the left, where Archangel Michael is depicted as guardian, Philax, in a full-length image. This representation, popular from the 14th century, shows Michael in a cuirass, holding an unsheathed sword, and positioned near the sanctuary entrance. As the patron saint of Kastellorizian Church, Michael is also its guardian, and by extension, the protector of its donors. The donors' portraits are positioned in supplication below Michael's blessing in the central blind arches of the north and south walls, suggesting their desire for the archangel to act as their protector and intercessor, safeguarding them in both their earthly and spiritual lives with his blessing encompassing both their bodies and souls. In the Conch of the Apse, we have a very commanding Christ Pantocrator. So this is Christ as the ruler of all, as both merciful saviour and stern judge. In this depiction, we really get a sense of his divine authority over the liturgical and eschatological realm. Following the Paleologan Renaissance style, he blesses with his right hand and holds a gospel in his other huge hand. Look how big his hands are. His frontal hieratic posture reinforces his cosmic rule. Despite obvious weathering that you can see below, the fresco retains its monumental presence, with faded saints below mirroring the heavenly hierarchy. The other iconographic type that I want to talk about in this church is the lamentation. So this is the moment after the crucifixion when Christ's body is taken down from the cross and mourned. The portrayal of grief here in the image on the left is emotional and performed. We see women with bowing heads, hands raised to their faces, and dark streaks beneath their eyes. The intensity of their mourning is palpable, creating an intimate atmosphere surrounding Christ. The rocky landscape, referencing Golgotha, further amplifies the sombre mood of the image. And I do apologise for the lack of clarity in the image, as these frescoes have not been restored, making it difficult sometimes to capture the full emotional depth of the scene, but it's clear that there is an emotional weight to it. And on the right, I've included two other very emotional Byzantine lamentation images just for comparison, so particularly focusing on the Virgin cradling Christ in her lap. And this is actually a pose that we can infer from the Kastellorizian depiction. So the upper right shows the Nerezi fresco in North Macedonia, and the lower right features the lamentation from Ayanariri in Kastoria. Notice how the bowing figures seem to merge with the landscape. Their hunchbacks mimic the shapes of the surrounding rocks. And this is especially striking in the Nerezi fresco, that's our upper image, where St. John's body appears as an extension of the terrain behind him. In contrast, the Kastoria image below presents Christ's body as completely rigid. His stillness stands in stark opposition to the shifting forms of the mountains behind him. The second church we will look at is Naos Ayas Annas in Anisaraki. Under Venetian rule, Crete saw a surge in St. Anna iconography and church dedications. The frescoes in this church have not been attributed to Ioannis Pagomenos, who was our previous artist, but are painted in his style. So there's clear that there was a kind of school or workshop that continued his techniques. And what stands out most for me in this church is its striking apse, where a commanding image of the Virgin Platitera presides. This is one of the most powerful representations of female authority in Orthodox iconography, which is also known as the Virgin of the Sign. So our word there at the top, Platitera, derives from the Greek word platis, meaning broad or wide, where the Virgin is portrayed with the Christ child enclosed in a medallion on her chest. Her hands are raised in the orans position, directly engaging the viewer. And the name Virgin of the Sign refers to the prophecy of Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Traditionally, and as seen here, the image is positioned in the apse above the holy table, so the altar, in Orthodox churches, emphasizing the Virgin's role as the bearer of God. We only see her bust, yet her presence is commanding. Her gaze remains intact, unlike in many examples where iconoclasts or later defacers have targeted the eyes. Her hands are lifted in perpetual intercession. Her mephorion is draped gracefully over her shoulders and forearms, its pleats rendered with exquisite detail. She is enthroned in the most sacred space of the church, positioned above the altar, overseeing the liturgy, her presence undeniable. The Virgin presides here, in the heart of the sanctuary, the Sacred Mother and mediator between heaven and earth, and figuratively always having Christ within her. So now we're looking at the previous image, but in situ. So in the sanctuary, on the left-hand side, the depiction of St. Anna holding the Virgin Mary presents a unique variation of the Odigitria type, emphasizing maternal intercession. St. Anna is shown enthroned with the young Virgin Mary on her lap. We see both figures without eyes and mouths. The figures are rendered with elongated proportions. Their delicate fingers and stylized drapery creates a sense of rhythmic elegance. Look at how even the Virgin, who is a baby, is depicted with these long fingers. This composition reveals Anna's role in the divine genealogy and also creates deep veneration of both figures. In the conch of the apse, as we just saw, the Virgin's expansive presence bridges the celestial and earthly realms. To the right, we've got Christ Pantocrator, we just went over this type before, who's depicted in his customary frontal pose, his commanding presence completing the triadic arrangement. This strategic placement, so we've got St. Anna on the left, the Platitera in the apse, and Christ, or also next to her, and Christ Pantocrator on the right, creates a theological and visual framework that shows the continuity from St. Anna to the Virgin and ultimately to Christ. The final image from this church that I want to show is a fresco of St. Anna nursing the Virgin Mary, known as the galactotrophusa, the milk feeder. So this comes from the Greek words gala, meaning milk, and trophusa, meaning nourishing or feeding. While the galactotrophusa is a common iconographic type depicting the Virgin nursing Christ, this version uniquely features Anna and Mary, emphasizing Anna's maternal role and her connection to Mary's sanctity. Anna is widely represented in Cretan churches. She often appears multiple times in the same space, typically on the northern nave wall or in the apse. This particular depiction, frequently paired with the birth of the Virgin, presents her as an intercessor and model of holiness, particularly for women. And to the right, I've given an example of the same iconographic type that I found on a previous trip in Kastellorizian. The church was Agios Stephanos. The frescoes in Agios Stephanos predate those in Agia Anna by some 200 years, but we can see that this iconographic type persisted across centuries. Our third church is the Hieros Naos tou Sotiros Christou in Temenia. This is a single nave chapel. It's an ambitious monument. It's sadly been damaged over time, but still preserves 14th century wall paintings, including an extensive passion cycle that reflects a distinct engagement with Western medieval artistic trends. Among these, the flagellation of Christ presents a particularly evocative depiction of Christ's suffering. Slumped forward and bound at the front, his body appears visually divided by the column to which he is tied. Our iconographer has rendered the column in the same colour as the background, causing it to visually dissolve into its surroundings. And this is unsettling. Christ appears both bound and fragmented. His form is interrupted by an absence rather than a structure, perhaps suggesting a loss of physical stability and heightening the emotional weight of the scene. First, because the column would be a compositional distraction, and second, because Christ would not have run away from his torment anyway. And this visual ambiguity between sky and column conveys Christ's suffering, his body almost absorbed into the setting, yet still bearing the weight of his impending passion. We see movement in these works, so we see figures aren't stagnant, and these Western trends are coming through. Our fourth church is the Naos Panagias Skafidianis Prodromi, which appears somewhat unassuming from the outside, but upon entering, one is immersed in a rich visual environment. The frescoes are remarkably well preserved, with these deep red borders, intricate patterns in the arches, and this characteristic burgundy division separating scenes. Compared to other churches in the region, the damage here is minimal, allowing the emotional depth of the frescoes to come through, particularly in the Dormition of the Virgin. Though slightly more restrained than similar depictions in Cyprus, North Macedonia, or northern Greece, the frescoes convey expression through facial details, eye contact, hand gestures, and a general sense of tenderness. The figures surrounding the Virgin's bier are visibly grieving. Their bodies are slumped in sorrow, while the Virgin herself lies with open eyes and her head propped up, her expression imbued with melancholy. I'm showing two more scenes here, so on the left, the birth of the Virgin, and on the right, the baptism of Christ. Echoing traditional Byzantine depictions of the Nativity of Christ, the composition of the birth of the Virgin scene exudes warmth and intimacy. St. Anna is our focal point. She sits upright on a seat or maybe a bed, enveloped in deep red drapery, while midwives bathe the newborn Virgin in a basin in the lower right. We really get a sense of maternal care and the sacred nature of the event. The gentle tilting of the heads, the soft gazes of the attending women create a tender, flowing rhythm across the image. Their elongated faces and subtly arched brows convey a quiet reverence, suggesting careful attention to the newborn Virgin. And to the right, we see a bit of a timid Joachim. He appears somewhat closed off, his body slightly turned away with a gentle gaze and head slightly tilted. His hand crosses over his torso, maybe a subtle gesture of withdrawal, yet he looks to the side, presumably toward the Virgin, signalling his quiet presence in the event. His positioning maintains the gendered spatial separation typical of Byzantine birth scenes, but still reinforces the familial aspect of the moment. The architectural backdrop, with its structured forms in reverse perspective and delicate detailing, evokes Paleologan influences and establishes a sense of and 50 results. Anyway, these numbers are more than just statistics. They highlight the ongoing imbalance in the art historical canon, where non-Western artistic traditions often receive scant attention. This tendency is not limited to Crete or the work of Pagomenos, but extends across regions like Turkey, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Serbia, where significant Byzantine art remains less studied in mainstream academia. While the Italian Renaissance is celebrated as the pinnacle of artistic achievement, and so it should be, during the same period, artists in the Eastern Christian world were producing extraordinary mosaics, frescoes, and architectural innovations. The Renaissance was, among other things, a triumph of historical continuity. It built on the artistic and intellectual traditions of antiquity in a way that was tragically impossible for the Greek world. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 and centuries of political upheaval meant that a comparable Greek Renaissance was never able to fully eventuate. And this is not simply a matter of neglect, but is a reality that's shaped by historical circumstances. Yet, the works leading up to the catastrophe rarely enter the global art historical discourse. And I don't bring this up to lament my own research challenges, but to critique what are perhaps structural biases in the discipline of art history itself. Integrating these lesser-known yet invaluable works into art history curricula would not just diversify the canon, it would offer a more complete understanding of the medieval and early modern artistic landscape. By broadening our scope beyond the Western Renaissance-centric gaze, we can embrace the interconnectedness of artistic tradition and the visual cultures that shaped our past. When I tell people I study Byzantine art, they usually say, "Oh, so icons?" I say, yes, kind of, but more so the stuff on walls, frescoes. And I don't blame people for thinking that I study icons. They're easily the most recognisable part of Byzantine art. However, there's so much more to explore beyond the still images of saints that tend to have a more reserved and contemplative nature. Icons are primarily for veneration rather than storytelling. In contrast, Byzantine frescoes with their narrative focus and dynamic compositions have movement and emotionality. And this reveals the broader, perhaps more complex nature of Byzantine art and why I'm so drawn to studying it. There is still much work to be done in uncovering and understanding these sites, their formal elements, their artists, their patrons, their devotional contexts. Many of these sites remain understudied and underfunded, with fading frescoes in need of restoration and histories that have yet to be fully explored. By engaging with these spaces, we don't just preserve them, we reintegrate them into the broader story of art history, ensuring that they're no longer sidelined in favour of Western narratives. Each visit, each study, even Instagram or TikTok posts, and each discussion brings us closer to understanding the richness of these extraordinary sites. So some of the themes we've explored tonight: expressions of emotion, the cult of St. Anna and the Virgin, stylistic elements, and even the adventure and mystery of accessing these sites, show just how much these spaces have to offer. They prompt us to reconsider how gender operates in sacred imagery, how female figures like the Virgin Mary and women saints are positioned. Byzantine, Western, and local influences converge in ways that defy rigid stylistic categories. We end up with a far more fluid artistic landscape than previously assumed. The treatment of religious figures, whether through the piercing gaze of a saint or the emotive gestures of Dormition scenes, reminds us that frescoes were not just decorative, but immersive and didactic, shaping the spiritual experience of those who encountered them. And they still affect me emotionally, perhaps all the more for their relative neglect and decrepitude. I want to thank you all for being here tonight and for taking the time to engage with these sites and their histories. I hope this has sparked curiosity or offered new ways of thinking about them, and perhaps even inspired an interest in exploring these sites firsthand. Thank you so much for joining me on my journey tonight.
Thank you, Olympia, for a wonderful presentation. So we'll close up the questions. I might just kick-start with the questioning. In studying Byzantine art and studying Byzantine frescoes, potentially you could be looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of churches within Greece and countries neighbouring Greece. What have been your selection criteria in choosing to study certain churches during the course of your PhD?
Lovely question. Thanks, Nick. So, by way of selection criteria, I usually decide that I want to study a particular church or region that I know holds Byzantine churches based on literature that I've read, though that can be very difficult when many of the churches are not documented. So sometimes I just know that there are Byzantine churches in a particular region. There's possibly very little published about who was in the workshop or who the actual artist is. And I guess part of my selection criteria comes back to that mystery of, well, no one's written about it. There's an evident gap in research on this church. Why shouldn't I uncover all of the dynamic elements and all of the emotion that are otherwise not discussed? So it can be a bit of a roundabout process. In Cyprus, for instance, I was fully aware, as everyone who's got an interest in Byzantine art would be, of the 10 UNESCO churches in Cyprus. So I made a beeline for Cyprus, knowing full well that I wanted to see these churches firsthand, and knowing that there was a lot of emotion in the frescoes that would just be amazing to see firsthand and to document. So, yes, I hope that answers some of the question.
I can monopolise the question because I've got the mic. Well, okay, outside Greece, let's say Byzantine art has been research has been ignored, or it's not to an extent that you did like. But what about Greek scholarship within Greece? People in Greece look at this as well.
Yeah, thanks.
And to what extent, generally, but you're still seeing gaps.
Absolutely, but what I love is that there are probably more Greek scholars studying Greek art than anyone from anywhere else in the world. So there's excellent work done in Greece. I mean, I feel strongly that there isn't enough, that there isn't more being published, and especially the issue with Greek scholarship is that it's not accessible to everyone. So unless there's a monograph or something published in English that's then taken on and given to the academic world, it won't be given the same attention.
Yeah. Doesn't venture beyond Greek boundaries.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for Olympia? I know you all are curious lot. Catherine.
Thank you for that. It was very interesting. Who does fund the restoration? Is it the Greek government?
That's a great question, thank you. I believe they're usually locally funded, but I can't say for sure.
I'm just thinking, does the Greek government apply to the EU for funds for this? Because they do they?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the logistics on funding.
It's probably a combination of factors and private donors as well. And So. Donnie?
Thank you. Stunning Olympia, both visually and intellectually. Beautiful work and well done.
Thank you.
I was struck by your comparative elements. So you shared with us images of frescoes in North Macedonia. You're mentioning Cyprus, Serbia. So, and one of your themes being sort of this blending. So I'm wondering then, in terms of, I guess there's two elements that I'm thinking of. Is like, what kind of sense do you have of the kind of translocal come pan-orthodox sort of movements of changes in style in relations to emotion, and by extension, just because similar to what you shared with us last year, and I can't help but always want to talk about diaspora, is that then, how are these? How does this extend into spaces that we enter here, right? That is to say, is there an element, if you will, an Australian Greek or pan-Orthodox kind of emotional style towards frescoes?
Wow. Thanks, Adoni. That's an excellent multi-layered question. I'll take us back to that image that you're talking about. No. So here, like you suggested, the images, the three that we're looking at, all come from different parts of the world. So we've got Crete on the left. In the upper element, we've got North Macedonia, and it's quite a remote village. And then we've got Kastellorizian on the bottom. So these locations are not next door. Yet the elements in each of these works are so similar. So we know that there were styles, that there was a model that the artists were following. We know that there were artists travelling. There was a lot of movement. And at least from what I can tell, like even if you look here at the Virgin cradling Christ, how her shoulder becomes a rock, how in the Neresi fresco her knee almost becomes an extension of the rock, St. John's body becoming a rock. These things are evident in multiple churches. I've only just chosen a few examples. So you're absolutely right. There's usually a kind of model and stylistic changes along the way. But with that, a lot of movement, a lot of artists going to different places and bringing that style with them. To the diaspora element of your question, that's an excellent, I really love it. I don't know exactly how to answer that. It's postdoc, I think so. But also something I think that could be relevant is that there is an emotional aspect to these works for the diaspora. So we, in Australia, we have frescoes in our churches that I think many of which come from overseas, come from Greece, and maybe some even from Constantinople quite recently, I believe. But these are engaged with emotionally by the diaspora who visits the churches. And so someone earlier, I think maybe even Spiz, we were talking about it and how often we enter in an Orthodox church and we just kind of don't even really engage with the work. So we're not really sitting there going, oh, that's this saint, that's that saint. They're just there. But I do believe to an extent that by virtue of being in the space of the church, these images are still interacted with by the diaspora on a kind of emotional level, even if it's not fully.
If I just say put a spin on that, I mean, you're absolutely right. Then if we think about age in that context, I mean, how many of us have been with a young kid who have no idea who these people above us and around us are, but the emotional effect of that environment is huge in the formation of how you identify with that place as you grow. So anyway, it's just fantastic to see this work.
Thanks so much, Athoni. I really appreciate it.
Should Dad allow to ask a question? Or, yeah?
Go for it.
That's really just to extend yours, Athoni. So why don't they say of Anna? You know, she's Mary's mum. That's Yaya. You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Jackie.
Yeah, thanks, Olympia. It was a great talk.
Thanks so much.
Enjoyed every second. Looking at these three works up here, and looking at the one on the left that is in a very different place in terms of its state of repair. What do you think that gives us, having this, a work that clearly has felt the passing of time, you know, physically, and what do you think we can learn from that we actually, I mean, you've got Notre Dame just being totally restored, and it's meant to be magnificent, but what has gone with it is a journey, and that was the debate over the Sistine Chapel ceiling as well. You know, no one liked the gelati colours, even though they were meant to be there. So what do you think we learn from these that we can't learn from the ones that have weathered better or have been restored?
Thanks, Jackie. I love that question. I think it's hard in a sense to learn a lot from them because it can be difficult if they're not restored to actually pull apart all of the formal elements of it. And it can be, like even in this image on the left, I really had to blow it up on my monitor to look at what expressions we're looking at. So you really struggle to see through all of the fading in this image. But having said that, I do think that there's a lot to learn from it. I think while on the one hand it's difficult to unpack all of those formal elements if in comparison to images on the right that you kind of can't believe that they're in the amazing condition that they're in. The other aspect of that is that we learn that they're sadly not funded and then they're not restored, and those are the other sorts of things that you learn. Neglected, yeah, and then that's another kind of emotional aspect of it all. So I'm not sure if that answers your question at all.
Yeah, these days there's AI software that restores photos, so that's another approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Olympia, I just want to ask a question related to iconography. Have you identified any iconographies that are particular to the Byzantine tradition that separates sort of this Christian art from Western?
Thanks, Biz. I like that question. I think a good example of that might be if we look at, I'll see if I've got any examples actually. Yes, okay, so here we're looking at the Virgin in the apse. Something about this image that's particularly Byzantine that you probably don't see at all in Western art is the Christograms. So the Christograms are the little symbols that you see on the either side of the Virgin's head that identify her, so they tell us who she is. This could be one particular element that we don't really get a sense of. It's sort of labelling system. I think even here, so our image on the right, it's a bit small, but you can see on the left there are some letters, and then on the right there are some letters, and then directly below there are some more. So what they're saying is Agia Ana, and they're kind of squished together. And then directly below, Mitir Theu, so the Mother of God. I don't really think we get Christograms that much in Western art. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's one of those more typical, strictly Byzantine things, something that I like.
What about in the fourth church, we saw the child in the river being swallowed by a fish, right at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
And so is that, what can we say about that icon? It's a snake.
Yeah.
It's a snake, is it? He's in the water, though.
Maybe it's up for debate what the creature is. But that's part of the fun of these images, and it's this kind of tradition that we get often in illuminated manuscripts, and there'll be all of these fun little curious symbolic things that happen in corners. And we get that in Byzantine art. So often there's this view that with Byzantine art, everything is full frontal, schematized, strictly organized. But there are these little fun things that come out of nowhere, just like that. Little kind of playful things that if you're sitting where you are in the church, and this is in the upper corner, you might struggle to see it, but then you do see it. And it's a fun aspect of the art. And this is the sort of thing that we see on Crete. We do get bits of it in Paleologan art as well, like on Mistras. In Cyprus, there are little elements like this, so small symbolic things that the artists really want to use up every little bit of space. It's like this horror vacui, the fear of emptiness, that every bit of space wants to be enjoyed and filled up, even if it's those little tiny playful elements like that.
Nick, I'm just going to ask one more thing, I can't help it. The landscape in some of the frescoes you showed us was fantastic. It's something that I haven't really paid particular notice to. So was that placing the life of different saints in different countries or locations, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's that thing of Anna in this birth scene is both in this very intimate atmosphere, a home, probably, well, maybe not, but she's at least in front of buildings. So it's this thing of both being intimate but also positioning itself in structured buildings, in reverse perspective. And that's, I really do feel that these elements are informed by Renaissance, Western Renaissance style, but they're greatly enjoyed by Greek iconographers. So you see these amazing architectural features quite a lot in the art of Mistras has a lot of this. Various churches in Crete enjoy it as well.
Thank you, Olympia. It's fascinating talk. I wanted to ask you what you thought of the big scandal in Greece in the National Museum. I don't know if you've heard about
Which one?
Oh, about the guy that portrayed, he portrayed, I think, St. George and different saints using heads of dogs like they did, let's say, in ancient Egypt.
Okay.
And there was all the protests. Did you notice it?
I actually am not aware of this.
Oh, you're not aware of it? All right, okay.
Oh, yesterday?
Yeah, it was big deal. Like,
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry about it.
I'll look it up.
Look it up. Don't worry.
Thank
but
you.
I wanna add. There was another. Can I just say something else, Nick? Yeah. I also I want to disagree with Antoni. I think we should stop navel gazing and relate everything to us, and understand that we are citizens of the world, and that you don't have to be directly related to the Greek diaspora to study this wonderful art. I mean, any person who loves beauty can see that.
And
So
I think, thank you. I think it's actually, we're in an interesting position in the diaspora where we're so removed from where these images are, where these churches are. We're on the complete other side of the world, yet there's a part of us that wants to study them. So my family in Greece finds it amazing that Chris and I go to these churches that are on their doorstep that they wouldn't think to visit. But this Australesa that has this random interest in churches really wants to visit them. So I think that the diaspora is an interesting part of this discussion, because there are things that are happening here, there's research that's happening here that's about monuments that are over there that we're bringing here in a sense, and perhaps even bringing back. So it's this thing of us giving something back to the Patrida that's granted us access to its patrimony.
And your research and commentary is in English, which means global access as well.
That's the other thing, yep.
If I'm allowed to make a suggestion to the picture on the right, the little man coming out of the fishes, could it be a personification of the river?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a really good way of reading it, I think.
I just wanted to firstly thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. This is actually, as a Greek Orthodox, raised in the Greek Orthodox Church, I think it's my first sojourn into Byzantine art history properly, so you've been incredible. I just was interested because you study gender, obviously, and I think in the picture on the left you mentioned sort of the different segregation in sort of the gender roles. What can you sort of gain from these frescoes about the different sort of understandings of how men and women expressed emotion and what was expected of both, if that was similar, different, and I guess the roles that they played in society as a result? I understand it's sort of a religious context here as well, and a religious story that plays into it, but yeah.
Thanks so much, Lani. Love your question. I actually really enjoyed thinking about gender in this scene, because obviously there's a lot going on with the women at the side who are sort of just, they really want to attend to Anna. They're sort of midwives, and they're present in the scene, but to the side in a kind of gaggle altogether. But closer to Anna is Joachim. But look at his comportment, how he's, maybe I'll just look at it here, how he's turned away but also involved. So he wants to be present in the scene. He's kind of, he's sideline, he's literally at the side, covering himself. He's the only man in the scene, but he still wants to be part of the event, and he's integral to the event. The event wouldn't have happened without him. So, yes, I love your question. There are those kind of gendered, spatial, usually there is a kind of segregation of gender in these images, but I also think that rather than viewing it as a segregation, it can also be viewed or framed as an involvement. So his involvement in the scene, and just looking at things like body comportment can be a really good way of addressing gender in work. So this is where my whole interest in emotion comes in. I hope that answers your question somewhat. I think this part of Byzantine studies really deserves more attention.
Take one final question before we close proceedings.
Hello, Olympia. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
When I think about Byzantine art, I associate it with the Orthodox religion. So the question is, how far did Byzantine art reach outside of the close regional countries of Greece? Did it get as far as Russia, for example?
Thanks so much, Milton. Great question. It absolutely did. And it went to non-Orthodox places as well. So, for example, Italy loved Greek art. And they took on lots of elements, so that Italy develops the maniera greca and takes on a lot of elements from Greek art. So it spread for sure, and I'd say to the point where other schools were just completely inspired by it. So there's a lot of, I guess, connection between different styles and different iconographers, different places. I hope that answers your question. Sorry.
Okay, I think we're coming close to a close. Let me just remind you that during the first week of this seminar series, we had Milton Paikopoulos speaking on classical Sparta, in other words, antiquity. Today we've moved to Byzantium, and next week, but I'd like to see you all, we're going into the modern period. The Greek Civil War, was it inevitable? So in 3 weeks here, you've been exposed to the whole span of Greek history. So it's another reason to come to this seminar series. A big round of applause for our speaker. And just a small gift.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope to see you all again next week as well. Bye.
Thanks so much, Spiz. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
I've already sent you the controversy.
Oh, amazing. Oh, thank you. I hadn't heard it.
So she's an art historian who's saying, what's the fuss? Here's a mayor in Greece who's out.